we can't spend money on programs just because they sound good and great. Meals on Wheels sounds great. Again, that's a state decision to fund that particular portion to it, to take the federal money and give it to the states and say, look, we want to give you money for programs that don't work. I can't defend that anymore.
Rural counties of Pennsylvania that provides after-school educational programs for individuals in those areas, which just so happens to be the state that helped propel President Trump to the White House. I'm curious what you say to those Americans in a community where they tell me today that 800 individuals will no longer, children who need it most, will no longer be provided in those most needy of communities the educational care they need.
I'm not familiar. Y'all are at an advantage over me because I have to memorize all 4,000 line items. So let's talk about after-school programs generally. They're supposed to be educational programs, right? And that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to help kids who don't get fed at home get fed so they do better in school. Guess what? There's no demonstrable evidence they're actually doing that. There's no demonstrable evidence they're actually helping results, helping kids do better in school, which is what, when we took your money from you to say, look, we're going to go spend it on an after-school program, the way we justified it was, these programs are going to help these kids do better in school and get better jobs. And we can't prove that that's happening.
To be clear, we're saying, the administration with this budget is saying that no after-school programs out there are doing their job in helping educate these children.
No, but I don't, and again, now you're asking me a question I don't know the answer to, but I don't believe we cut all the funding for those types of things. Yes, sir.
Mulvaney, just to follow up on that, you were talking about the steel worker in Ohio and the coal miner in Pennsylvania and so on, but those workers may have an elderly mother who depends on the Meals on Wheels program, who may have kids in Head Start. And yesterday or the day before you described this as a hard power budget, but is it also a hard-hearted budget?
No, I don't think so. In fact, I think it's probably one of the most compassionate things we can do to actually
help the elderly.
You're only focusing on half of the equation, right? You're focusing on recipients of the money. We're trying to focus on both the recipients of the money and the folks who give us the money in the first place. And I think it's fairly compassionate to go to them and say, look, we're not going to ask you for your hard-earned money anymore. Single mom of 2 in Detroit, okay? Give us your money. We're not going to do that anymore unless we can guarantee. Please let me finish. Please let me finish. Unless we can guarantee to you that that money is actually be used in a proper function. And I think that is about as compassionate as you can get.
Steve Bell, a former staff director of the Senate Budget Committee and a senior advisor at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Also joining us, Jonathan Capehart, an opinion writer for the Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Steve, you've been studying federal budgets longer than any of us. What's the difference between the approach taken then and the approach you're seeing tonight?
I think the operative word is vindictiveness, frankly. Most of the programs that Reagan cut were not really cut. We really froze a lot of domestic programs. We eliminated almost none. We did add a lot of money in defense, and the president was able to sign the bill into law in August of '81. But there was never any discussion at the level of the discussion of this budget, where you're going to cut nursing training when we don't have nurses, Meals on Wheels, which helps, by and large, low-income, poor, white people. There's a certain vindictiveness, and I think cuts to the to the public broadcasting system. For 40 years we've heard, 35 years we've heard that. This is honestly a tired, old budget. I could have pulled one out of Heritage. In 1981, it would have said the same things and doesn't do a darn thing for the debt and doesn't do anything for the deficits that we're going to. So it really is, there's a certain vindictiveness to this that bothers me.
The idea that President Trump, a New Yorker, is going to clobber New York City funding for the police, federal funding for the New York City Police Department is just mind-blowing. And one other thing, Lawrence, on the Meals on Wheels piece, because there's a factoid that people need to understand. 1 year of Meals on Wheels for a senior is the equivalent of 1 day in the hospital for that senior. So the fact that the skinny budget is going to take money away from Meals on Wheels and possibly hurt seniors is just stunning. And I agree with Steve. This budget, everywhere you look at it, is vindictive. And I just sort of, quite frankly, am afraid of what's going to happen when we move from the skinny budget to the fat budget that's yet to come.
We're out of time for this. Steve Bell, Jonathan Capehart, thank you both very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you.